So it's recording.
Yeah.
So I'm doing this interview project because I was telling you last night that I have a whole bunch of stories. We all have stories that we tell,
Right.
and they change when we tell them, and a lot of people benefit from our stories, which is one of the reasons we tell them, besides
Right.
just entertaining ourselves. And one of my impulses was to not just have it be narcissistic, because although I think my stories are useful to inspiring to certain people, I know that many other people's are as well. And the more uniquely we live our lives, the more inspiring we can be, right?
Right.
So I want to start with a simple introduction and kind of roots. So say your preferred name,
Bell Circle.
which is what I know you as now.
Right.
And I don't need you to talk about your other name unless you want to, but what I would like you to talk about is however long of a story you want to tell about how you got here. So a little bit were you, I grew up with suburban parents, but surrounded by commercial agriculture in rural Indiana as a fucking Catholic, and then blah, blah, blah. So just having a little bit of roots story, because that connects to people who...
Right. So I was born in Southern California, and I was pretty small, I think 4. My mom and step-funkle. My mom married my dad, divorced my dad, and married my father's brother, making him my step-funkle. And they owned a snow cone stand at the bottom of Santa Monica Pier. And so I grew up as a beach kid until I was 10. And my mom and stepdad were fantastically irresponsible about me and just let me have all the freedom that I wanted. And I was smart enough to make my way in the world, but I did a lot of things that were really dangerous, and I probably hung out with people I shouldn't have been allowed to hang out with, and saw things I shouldn't have seen. But I also, the whole hippie explosion was happening around me at the age of 5 on Santa Monica Beach and on Venice Beach. And so that was a really big influence on me.
What year were you born?
I was born in 63,
Okay.
so I was 5 and 68.
Okay.
And then when I was 10, we moved to Washington, and about a year later, Washington State, and about a year later, we moved overseas first to Iran. And I lived in Iran, Iraq, and Libya. And most of the time in Iran.
From 10 till...
From 11, just turned 11 to 14.
Okay.
And
were you on bases, or were you on compounds?
no,
or were
I
you
was in private housing. So my mom had remarried, and my new stepdad was his checks were cut by Boeing, but as it came out later, he actually was a technician trainer for the CIA. So not a field agent, a nerd.
Good nerd.
Somebody who taught people how to use the surveillance gear.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And but for political reasons, he didn't appear to be working for the CIA. And yeah, living in the Middle East under the Shah, and under that was a really liberal time in the Middle East in a way that we've totally forgotten.
Yeah, it's been overshadowed at this point. How did you respond as that age? In that age, did you embrace the culture? Was it just...
Oh God, yeah. I loved Persia. The Iranians were incredible people. So poets were like rock stars.
Yeah.
Literally, they'd wear disguises, or crowds would mob them and tear clothing off of them. It was really this weird, poets were really emulated. If you asked educated people the question, what do, they would tell you about their art or their garden, or you'd have to say, what do you do for money?
Yeah.
And then they'd tell you what their business career was. But their identification, what are you? Oh, I'm a poet. I heard that one a lot. I'm a gardener. That was another really common one.
I'm a gardener. Did you learn any
I
at
learned
that
a lot
age
of
where
Farsi.
you
I
learned some
learned a lot of
Farsi?
Farsi, and I both written and spoken, and written well enough to be able to read poetry.
Yeah. Wow.
And
Again, your mind was so pliable at that point. Yeah.
it was.
You were able
It
to.
was. Yeah. The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam really is as spectacular as any poetry ever written in any language. It's incredible. It just isn't in English. It's terrible in English.
Mm.
It's this unbelievably rich song in Farsi, its original tongue.
What is your? Were you raised with an ethnic identity?
No, I wasn't raised with an ethnic identity, but I was raised by. My grandmother had a lot of influence on me, and she was aligned herself to European pagan traditions before there was really like a modern neo-pagan or neo-Wiccan movement.
Was she Celtic?
Yes, she was. She was Irish in descent, and she was a member of the Catholic Church, and she went to Mass so that she could be seen going to Mass, and she believed it was important to have a Catholic identity, and she actually taught me that that the burning times could come again, and that it was important to have a way to disappear into Catholicism, and I was kind of like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'd have to actually say the statement of faith, and I'm sorry, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
They're asking me to submit.
Did you go to church regularly as a kid, though? Did you?
She would take me to Catholic services, and after we came back to the States, was when I became more serious about studying religion, and so I took myself to a lot of different
Did you come
kinds
back
of
to the
services.
States at 15, or was it more traveling
14
after
and a
Libya?
half.
Okay. Yeah.
And my culture shock upon returning to America was really terrible. It was so hard to return.
It's always, it's still that way now. If you leave and come back.
It was hard to come back to the U.S. We're so rude. We're so rude and unsophisticated and childish.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh my God, they're all children.
Yeah. I was just
Where
in
are the
civilization.
adults?
I didn't know what civilization was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Some of that feeling, definitely.
As a teenager, amplified.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I came back, I checked out a lot of different religions, and
Okay, so the two questions that
Sure.
I have that derivate from this point, that are good lineage, and you can answer whichever one you want, whichever
Yeah.
order is. One, I want you to talk about tribes that you associate with and how that's nourished you, but I also want you to talk about the importance and usefulness of myth, and the importance and usefulness of not using myth, because you brought that up last night. So 'cause I'm sure you have some
I do
usefulness
I do.
for it.
The tribal one.
Just to recap, you told this little story last night of showing these people in Laos, was it?
Yeah.
Pictures of the rainbow people and fairy people,
Right.
and they recognized that you had a tribe and you weren't alone. You
Right.
weren't an isolated.
I wasn't
lone
an
person.
isolated thing. Yeah, I'm actually part of a bigger thing. So a big influence on me and one of my major tribes is the Rainbow Family. And I first found out about the Rainbow Family when I was 14 and just come back to the States. And at a little kind of new agey store, there was a flyer on the window that was a howdy folks, an invite to the gathering and directions to get there. And I was like, can I just run away? Is there some way? And I'm like, no, I was really, really small physically.
Yeah.
And it was just too easy to identify me as being a child. And I was like, damn it, the police will just grab me and drag me back home, and it'll be a total drag.
And this was back in California?
I was living back in Washington with my grandma.
Washington, right.
And So I knew about this group, and it took me until I was 20 to actually get to a gathering.
Where was
And
the first one?
that was the first gathering I went to, and it was
where
in
was
Michigan.
the-
The
oh,
first one
Michigan.
was in Colorado in 1972, and so
Wow.
it was. I went to the 10th one, 1982, and I knew I was home. People, you come into the Rainbow Gathering and the catchphrase is "Welcome home,"
Yeah.
and it actually felt like I was home, and that was a really wonderful experience. And I spent 20 years going to every national gathering and became one of the critical focalizers. I ran the bank and did a lot of different things. Did a lot of the liaison work between our legal team and the Forest Service directly. Testified in court a lot, and that's a really awesome one for me because rainbow culture has spread all over the world now.
Yeah.
And I haven't been to an international gathering yet, but I hear stories from people, and I'm like, that's my policy. That thing you're talking about is something I did, right? So it's really been awesome to be able to see my influence without ever having been. I've never published a book, and I haven't published songs, but I have an influence.
And that's very rainbow to me. I mean, or at least the way that I perceive rainbow. I've only been to 2 gatherings, and one was a regional Y2K survivalist gathering, which I walked out of because I was like, this is a fucking nightmare. And the second one I went to was one in Italy. And the one that was the survivalist gathering was south of Sedona, and the one in Italy was just north of Tuscany, and it was like 3,000 people. I think the Sedona one was 200. So I've never been to like a 20,000, 40,000 person national gathering.
Right. Okay. Another big tribe influence on me was at the age of 10 was the first time I fell in love, and it was with a boy. And I still remember him vividly and still can call up the feeling. And while it was childish and unsophisticated and uncomplicated, it was identical to the thing that I feel when I say I'm romantically in love with someone now.
Yeah.
And this is the early 70s, and homosexuality is illegal and forbidden, and is incredibly oppressed in a way that it's really hard for us to remember how bad it was. And then growing up as a teen, the parts of gay culture that were coming up and were visible to me weren't me at all. And I didn't really find queers that were like me until at a Rainbow in 1984. I wandered into the first radical fairy camp at Rainbow, run by Dennis Perone, and that's how I met Dennis Perone, and went, oh, really? There's there are people like me. And radical fairies were a tiny movement then still, And so I guess I would say Rainbow and Radical Fairy are the two of the most important tribal.
So what was the first fairy gathering you went to?
The first solely fairy gathering was in Short Mountain in 2004.
Oh,
but
okay.
But people have been trying to get me to come to Short Mountain for years and years and years, and it was kind of like, well, the problem is that I'm super involved with Rainbow, and I spend a month every year at Rainbow. I don't really have time for other festivals. I have to have a life.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you should come. And what actually happened was I was traveling with my then partner, Shiloh, and she killed the engine of our car, ignored the it's overheating light, and ignored that we had a radiator leak, and I was sleeping in the car. I heard the car die. Pulls over on the side of this hill in Tennessee, and I get out the map, and we have AAA plus. It's 100 miles, and literally a compass. And I measure with the map what's a 100-mile radius, and I draw a circle around right where we are. And I'm like, great, we got to find somewhere to be for a while. Short Mountain was on there, and I had our vehicle towed to.
So were you
the
planning
nearest
to
town.
go to Short Mountain?
Not at all.
Ah.
I hadn't even been planning on going to Short Mountain. No, it was just.
It was there.
And there are people there who love me.
And you had an invitation.
And I had an invitation.
And what time of year was it?
It was in summer before fall gathering. So fall gathering that year was the first gathering that I went to.
Nice to start with fall gathering.
With fall gathering. And then by the next spring, I'm an integrated part of the community.
Yeah.
And, you know. But yeah, I lived in Tennessee for 7 years because my car died there.
I remember Goat telling a story about that.
Yeah, I lived in his house.
Yep. Your car was parked out there for a while.
Yeah.
You had a dog, if I remember correctly.
I did, Jacques, yes.
We don't need to go into the details about
Right.
that, but that's fine. But I remember that as part of the story.
Right.
Because I first went to Short Mountain in 2003. And
Okay.
have you been to all the other sanctuaries in the United States?
I have not yet been to, you know what, I haven't been to Zuni and I haven't been to Destiny.
Oh, okay. Have you been to Breitenbush? It's not
I
a
have been to
sanctuary, but
Breitenbush,
it's, you know. And I've never been to Kawashaway, which I don't know if that's really a sanctuary. You've heard of Kawashaway?
I have heard of Kawashaway, and I'm not sure what's going on with
People
Kawashaway.
don't live there, but they have
Right.
gatherings there.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like Destiny.
No,
was
people
for a
live there
long
now.
time. Now, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they
For a
finally
long
did.
time, you're right. People
Right.
don't live there. No. People live there. And Wolf
I've
Creek
kind of
people
been
don't really-
disassociated in some ways for a little while from radical fairy culture. There are things going on in it that are really disturbing to me, and I'm not sure that I wanted to throw my weight into the politics.
Well, and
or that the
how,
time was
how
right
often
for
are
that.
you going to rainbow gatherings right now?
I actually, so I did it for 20 years, and then I left very formally.
Ah.
And saying this is going in a direction that I can no longer be a part of. My honor is standing behind this thing, and it is. I stopped telling young people you should go to Rainbow. When they tell me about it, I was like, oh, don't go. And I was like, oh God, I'm one of the leaders.
Yeah.
And I'm telling young
I'm a
people,
rainbow elder.
I'm a
Like,
rainbow
don't
elder,
go.
don't go.
Uh,
And so I did the native thing and I voted with my feet.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
said, I can't. So this is what I'm doing. All you people are my family, my home. You know how much I love this, how incredibly painful it must be for me to do this. And this is how necessary it is. So I'm going to leave. And they convinced me to return in 10 years to visit for my 50th birthday. And I did, and that was the Montana gathering in 2014. And people ask me, well, has it come to pass what you predicted? And I was like, yes, unfortunately. They're like, are you going to come back now? Like, no, I'm not.
No.
No, you didn't listen. So the funny one was that I talked to a lot. I saw a lot of my old friends there and talked a lot with them. And this year it was in Oregon, and because it was in Oregon, I went.
Oh, okay, you did visit.
I did
You
go.
weren't a
I went.
foundation member,
Oh,
you just went.
well, the funny one is I only went for 4 days, and I swore I wasn't going to get involved. I was wearing a radio in 4 hours and had scheduled info shifts for the next 3 days, like that night. And yes, I am getting involved again, because there were people who actually worked on things, who 2 days into the gathering were like, so that thing that you said that really bothered you, is that any different? And I had to be like, yes. And one person in particular was like, great, I've been really working on that. So given...
And it's somebody you knew from the old
Yes,
days? You went, oh,
yes.
great,
And they were like, I did this because of your analysis. And I'm like, did you do this to see if you could convince me to come back? Yes. And I was like, that's a really tough argument.
Thing to
yeah.
ignore. You don't want
yeah,
to
I can't ignore it,
Yeah.
right? I'm all about, is it the truth or not? Is it real? Can I see it in front of me? They're like, well, you can see it, right? I'm like, yes. Like, she's like, so positive change is possible. I proved to you that movement can happen. And I was like, yes. She's like, so could you please help? We have this myth and rainbow of anyone's replaceable. Anybody could do any job. And it's just not true. Like, the bank is half to a third of what it was when you ran the bank. And we need the money. And we don't have anybody else who's willing to do what you do. And I didn't quite turn people upside down and shake them, but I was willing to do things like, so they're sitting in the circle and they open up their wallet and they're pulling out the 5. I lean over them, look down in the wallet and say, how about the 50? Which you spent for dinner on the way in. How about you give me, they got more money. How about you give me what it costs for your last hotel room and meals for your group the last night into the gathering. You're staying for a week, right? That seems reasonable. 1 day's accommodations, you know. Instead of getting a 5 out of people, I'd get $200 out of people, right? And that adds up fast.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I'm back involved with Rainbow, and contemplating getting more involved with Radical Fairy. And in Radical Fairy, it's the white powder drugs are making a deep incursion into Radical Fairy culture. And I think it's time for me to stand up and be like, hi, that's gay culture.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Go take it
gay
back to the
culture,
bar.
and we're not-
Go
yeah.
take it back to the bar. We're actually something else. And we are rooted in marijuana and psychedelics, and those things are purified evil, and no.
Well, when you lived
don't need
you
to.
lived at the mountain, there was somebody living at the sanctuary selling white powder drugs out of his house.
I am currently still forbidden to be at Short Mountain and have not fixed that issue, and that is largely because I raised heck about that.
Yeah, because that really turned me the fuck off when I was
Right.
just like, I was like, yo, this is the most beautiful building, and there's an A-list fairy feeling here, and they're selling this shit out of here. Like, it was
Right.
totally unacceptable to me.
Right.
But I go in and out of fairies as well. I mean, there's just times where it's the right magic, and there's times in my life where I'm like, oh, you've never done a fairy gathering? You should do it. And then there are times like, yeah, they're annoying. Don't, you know, sometimes it's too much urban gay culture, and that's
Right.
just not what we need.
Right.
We don't need a circuit party out in the fucking forest.
Right. Yeah. I've never been to a circuit party because I'm absolutely certain I would hate it. You know?
I went to the black party once. It was so fucking weird. But it was great. I'm glad I went. So
Okay.
somebody gave me a free ticket. So I went
Right.
to the black party, and I was like, right, okay, this is the deal. This
Right.
is the deal. It's fine.
Cool. Yeah.
Anyway,
You're
yeah.
asking about myth and non-myth.
Well, the usefulness. We brought that up with, relative to truth or truths. You were talking about creating a spiritual.
Myths are really useful for explaining really complex stuff to children.
But we
And
also
they're-
talked about how when you come back to this country, you know how most of these people are children. So they're useful at all ages. They're children at all ages. So go
There
on.
are children at all ages.
There are sophisticated people, but go back. Go ahead.
Yes. And I think myths have the greatest potency in the culture they're born in at the moment that they're born. And they become senescent over time. And I believe in making space for people to create completely new myths
Yeah.
and leave the old ones behind. Create ones that we invest with meaning. And an example for me is for Pythagoras, the 5 elements that was the best scientific description they could come up with physical reality. It was in no way an analogy. It was not a metaphor, and it wasn't a myth. And if I could go back and explain to Pythagoras that he had a good idea about the elements, but actually they're like oxygen and carbon, and I could remove oxygen from air and show what happens to a bird in the vacuum jar and put the oxygen back in,
Yeah.
and it revives.
Yeah.
Well, you got some powerful magic. How do I learn that? And that thing would be left behind. I think it's time for us to invest what we know about the world now with mythic power, and not keep saying, oh no, they knew then. No, that was them trying to have physical knowledge.
Yeah.
Now we have a more advanced physical knowledge. Can we allow that to be imbued with spiritual meaning? And it's really, the Catholic Church's history that has demanded that science say, no, we're not talking about God. We're just talking about the physical world. Oh yeah, God is only your scripture. Yes, please don't burn me. God, please don't burn me. I'm not talking about God.
I'm not saying that you're wrong.
I'm not saying that you're wrong.
Yeah.
And I know that I take a daring position to be like, no, actually you're wrong. And I've already been warned about the patriarchal structure notices you're not allowed to do this thing, and I'm really not interested in drinking the hemlock.
Right. But if there are monoliths that have been built over time, you can't just walk over and knock it over.
No, you have to undermine them.
Yeah. It takes a lot of chipping.
Yeah, it does.
It's a lot of chipping. And you have to be careful about chipping the monolith, because there are
Right.
people like, hey, don't chip my monolith!
Right.
You know? But that's what it is. It's this somewhat useful thing that's now this gigantic glass tower that has a bunch of crazy fucking people living at the top of it, and
I kind of like
and dumb people holding
prefer
it
to
up.
find a way to get the termites to go and
Yeah,
undermine it.
exactly.
No, I have nothing to do with those termites. How can you think that I had anything to do with
I
those
didn't bring
termites?
termites to your house. What are you talking about? Those are from Africa. How did they get here? Okay, so that's an interesting metaphor. So again, this is a useful... Metaphors and myths aren't the same thing. However, some people can directly experience life, right? And some people need narrative.
Yes.
Right, and that there's a lot of psychological arguments that talk about how life is a whole bunch of crazy non sequiturs that make no sense, and we just narrativize it all the time, like dreams. Like dreams are these blipping up images, or at least what we understand of them, and we narrativize it as soon as we wake up because it's what makes sense. So that's one of the things I think about myths, and I like what you just said about the importance of making new myths. But myths are probably intrinsic to a myth is communication. And so if you're getting involved with communication, you have to use words. And if you're getting involved with words, you're using these things that you didn't make, and most of them have been bastardized to the point that they're absurd. But there's rerouting words, radicalizing words, but it's difficult to make new myths without using the paintbrushes and the colors of past myths, right?
Right. Which is why, so I've gotten a lot closer to being able to cogently state my philosophy, and been working on writing that out. And concurrent with that, I'm creating a dictionary.
Oh.
So, but I'm bothering to define of, the, and, was, to, for. Every single way I use a word will be defined clearly. So I can be like, no, actually, you're attempting to say something other than what I said. And here's my words, right? So it's treating language like math.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
And it's a way to claim those words myself and be like, well, you may mean that by it. I did not. So you can't analyze my argument based on what you meant by the word, because that's not what I meant by the word.
There are a lot of people who understand that kind of discourse and a lot of people who don't. So when you encounter someone who can't even conceptualize different meanings of words, like
Right.
relative truths relating to
Right.
words, how do you tend to respond to that?
I teach them songs.
You teach them songs.
I use music. Yeah,
That's
and I use the
interesting.
poetic
So I
language
haven't
of
seen
music.
I haven't seen you play anything right now, but that's a very important part of you. You're a musician.
Yeah, I'm a musician.
Well,
I'm a
talk a
singer.
little bit about that. Okay. Talk a little bit.
So for me, in rainbow culture and in radical fairy culture, one of the most precious things about our culture is our songs, and not pop songs that are written by people within that culture to express our philosophy. And there's a lot of wisdom and truth and beauty that's in those songs. And I've observed that the quickest way to get a group of people closer to the divine is by singing together, opening up their voices together. And it helps they understand the words have genuine meaning, and they agree with them. Then they go even deeper into it.
So when you say then you would teach them songs, you would teach them a song and then you would extrapolate the meaning, or extrapolate the
No, I
meaning
let
as
the
you teach
meaning.
them
I
the
let the meaning. I let the meaning come on
Resonate.
its own.
Yeah.
And I can give you another example. Like they really can't. Like people who have been, especially around spirituality, a lot of people have been so traumatized. I mean, look at the number of people who were traumatized to death by it.
traumatized to death.
And they can't accept anything that is religion. So I use humor, and commonly a humor thing that I use is chai, the spiced Indian drink that so many people know about now. And
Chai latte?
I don't tend to do that one, no, because I actually So there's a whole philosophy I have around chai and kind of a religion.
That's a big part of rainbow culture, isn't it? There's always chai wallas at rainbow culture, isn't there? At least the one I went to in Italy. You were a chai walla?
No, I was not chai walla.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm one of the original tea people. There's like 3 people that started the tea ceremony thing in hipster culture, and I'm like, hi, I'm one of those people. But I wasn't known as Bell.
No.
And so chai, I can get people to sing, may your chai mug go unbroken, let's drink chai, Lord, let's drink chai. There's a ladle up in heaven, in the sky, Lord, in the sky. But they would never sing a note of that in its original. I can take really loving, sweet, hippie songs and replace the word love and God with chai, and they'll sing it with devotion. And the other side of their brain just puts the word in there and takes it in. The part that has the empty hole in their spirit is nourished by participation in this ritual with other people.
Yeah.
And they do come closer to the divine this way. And I get there by humor. So, and I guess, okay, that's an example of myth. I have a myth about there's aliens who brought chai to the earth, and there's a symbol of their covenant with humans, and it's the ladle in the sky. The uninformed call that the Big Dipper. Right? And in every 24-hour period, it pours out upon the earth.
Nourishing the earth
Nourishing
with
the
sweet
earth
chai.
with sweet chai. Right. And the Milky Way is the milk of the holy cow.
Pouring into the chai. Yeah. Into the chai pot. Where's the chai pot in the sky?
Right. That's an inner mystery.
It's an inner mystery. Oh, revelations.
Right, there are revelations.
The revelations of the inner chai pot.
Right, and I am the Popo Disco, the leader of the Church of Chai.
Oh, yeah. It's a long tradition.
It is, yes.
That's great. Okay, what else? I think that's pretty good. Is there something else you feel like you want to add to anything you've said, or that you
Sure,
just
I want to
really...
explain it one thing. So I'm called Bell Circle.
Oh, yeah.
And I change my name every decade.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so pretty much like clockwork, I'm about 3 years away now. I'm starting to think about, okay, so what's my next name? And this is about reducing both my infamy and my fame, and making it so that people don't come with the knowledge of me when they meet me. I'm nobody. I'm just another person. And I am close friends with Hugh Romney, and people know as Wavy Gravy.
Right, okay.
People come up to Wavy Gravy all the time in the street, and they know who Wavy Gravy is, and they are relating to Wavy Gravy, and they cannot see Hugh Romney. And I was like, oh God, Hugh, that looks really tough. He said, it is. And I tolerate it because it gives me power to move people, and it gives me power to spread love in the world, and
Yeah.
But it's really hard on him.
So,
And it also makes it so the stories don't build up around me, so oligarchic forces would pay more attention.
right. You have little breaks throughout time.
Right.
Reset switches.
Right.
And you just expressed the intention about that, but is like Wavy Gravy could be called a character. Is Bell Circle a character?
Bell Circle is this is me in this decade. It also enables me to recognize that, like, physically every single molecule in my body is replaced on about a 10-year basis, not my cells, but the actual molecules. Physically, I am not the person I was under my last name. And so it's a reminder to me of that. It allows me to change. Is Bell Circle a character? Yes, to some degree, but that's this character in this decade.
Yeah.
And in the next decade, I will be someone.
You don't feel like you have a more true self with a secret name?
Oh, totally I do.
Oh, you do? Okay. There are one of the story, I don't know if I've ever told you this story that you may enjoy relating to this and other stories you told. was I got to hang out with a bunch of Iranian refugees in Rotterdam for a year. And the sheikh didn't speak any English, but he was studying. But I don't guru very well. So I would hang out with them as just like a friend. And one time he invited me to stay the night for a Sharaf Shams ritual thing where he made me this little medallion. But then he also wrote out a codex for me. And again, he couldn't talk to me in English, so other people were talking to me in English. But he wrote out this codex of the Farsi letters as they related to the English phonemes and the numerical value of each of the Farsi letters. And he showed me that if I added my first name plus my mother's first name and divided by 12, I got the astrological sun sign I was born under. And I was like, so I tried it with 10 people that I knew, their mother's name, their first name, and their astrological sun sign, and it worked with 9 of them. And so I remember reading something when I was 11 or 12 that said wizards always protect their true name because people can control you if they know your true name. And I always was like, that's an interesting thing to know. But then when this Sufi sheikh showed me this codex, I was like, okay, because I was studying astrology at the time, but I kept being like, but it might all be bullshit. Astrology, who knows? It might just be new age garbage. And it totally eradicated all my doubt. I was like, okay, if somehow our random names, what names that seem random, are somehow encoded in whatever the stars or something, okay, I'll stop doubting that. So I think it's a useful and a wise thing to have a secret name, and but I was wondering if they're like, again, if you like there are people who know me as Vine and have very different beliefs about me than I do. I guess there's a lot of people who know me as Dominic and have lots of very different beliefs about me than I do as well. So that's everybody's a character, and that's why It's easy to be like, well, Belle's a character, but it's not like you're changing personas
Yeah, no, I think of it
you're
more
not artificially creating a persona change.
Right.
You're just
I very much use deliberate levels of trust and intimacy. I really pick and choose what level I'm letting someone into, and have very clearly defined layers. And I feel like that enables me to stand at the leading edge of that level. People perceive me as being warm and friendly, kind, intimate, open. There's a lot of layers that it takes years of knowing me before I'm even vaguely going to open that up to you and trust you enough. Yeah. And that's me actually being warm and intimate. But I can be generous and warm and step up to the leading edge of that thing because I am protected. Because I have protected myself. And you can't immediately get so far in that you can really wound me too much. You know? It kind of reminds me of a thing I really liked about formal Persian houses. Old style houses will have a room, usually with like very small, simple bathing facilities, no way to cook food, and a door that leads to the street. Well, it's the only door that leads to the street. A traditional Persian house, you enter through gates and through the garden. There is no street entrance. The wall in the street is blank to 2-3 stories. Right? You have to climb over the really tall garden walls coated in glass to get into the house. Breaking into a traditional Persian house is really difficult. But there's this one room with a door that leads to the street, and that's for guests and strangers. And it enables you to bring a stranger home, feed them at your table, and then take them out. So lock the door behind you when you go. They're free to go and come and go as they please, but you haven't left them access to your children.
So that one room doesn't have doors that lead to the rest of the house. Has absolutely no doors that lead to the rest of the house.
And so it lets you extend kindness to the total stranger, or to the person who you may know is dangerous.
Yep. Interesting. Good metaphor. All right. Well, that's good. Thank you very much, Mel.
You're welcome.
And just the little what led to this interview was blah 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 things happened. I ended up leaving California, going back up to the Oregon coast, and felt lost. It was a very strange sensation because I saw people that I hadn't seen in years that just materialized out there on the coast, and I was just like, oh hi, and it was, but they, like, one of them said, I really wish I could help you and take you south again, and I was like, I hear what you're saying, but I don't feel that. And yet I felt like I wanted to escape as much as possible. I didn't feel like going with this person. So after 2 days, I came back over and I looked on Craigslist, and I got this Craigslist ride with somebody I actually had met at Short Mountain and who was staying with you, and somebody I just met at Breitenbush, so 3 different fairy connections. And it was really impressive. It's just very nice to see you again, because I think it's probably been 6 years since I saw you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's really
thank you so much for talking and
It was
and
enjoyable.
everything. Yeah. Respect you, and it's so nice to see you again. Thank you.